The woman stood frozen in the doorway of the small ranch house, her travel bag resting at her feet, dust still clinging to the hem of her dress. She had crossed 3 states by train and wagon, carrying nothing but a letter and a promise that might not be real. The cowboy in front of her, tall, quiet, eyes weathered by loss, had not spoken since opening the door. When she finally broke the silence, her voice barely steady, she asked, "Where should I undress?" The words weren't about clothes. They were about fear. About whether this place would truly become her home. About whether she was safe enough to be herself. The cowboy understood that immediately. He saw it in the way her hands trembled, in the guarded hope behind her eyes. He didn't look away or laugh. He didn't misunderstand. Instead, he stepped aside and said softly, "Nowhere you don't feel safe." That answer stopped her breath. No man had ever said that to her before. In that moment, the ranch house, small, worn, imperfect, felt warmer than any place she'd known. As she followed him inside, memories of rejection and hardship followed her like shadows. She had been unwanted before, passed over, spoken about as if she were a burden. But here the silence wasn't cruel. It was gentle. Outside the prairie stretched endlessly, and inside something fragile and new began to form. The cowboy showed her the spare room, the wash basin, the simple bed. "You rest," he said. "We'll figure the rest out tomorrow." That night, as the wind moved across the plains, she realized the question she had asked wasn't about changing clothes. It was about whether she could finally lay down her defenses. And for the first time in years, she believed she might. Morning arrived softly, sunlight spilling across the wooden floor like a promise. The woman stepped outside, breathing in the open air, feeling lighter than she had in years. The cowboy was already working, repairing a fence with calm focus. There was no pressure in his presence, no demands. Over breakfast, they spoke carefully, honestly. He told her about the loss that had hardened him, about how the ranch had nearly failed after his wife's passing. She told him about being sent away, about surviving by keeping her heart guarded. As days passed, something changed, not through grand gestures, but through shared work, quiet meals, and mutual respect. One afternoon, as they sat watching the sunset, she said softly, "I think I finally understand what I meant that first night." He didn't interrupt. "I wasn't asking where to undress," she said. "I was asking where I could stop pretending." He nodded slowly. "Then you're already there," he replied. That answer changed everything. She no longer felt like a guest. She became a partner in the ranch, in decisions, in hope. Townsfolk noticed the difference too. Where there had once been loneliness, there was now laughter. Where there had been survival, there was purpose. Love grew not from passion, but from safety. From being seen. From being allowed to heal. And when he finally asked her to stay, not out of need, but out of choice, she said yes without fear. Because she had already undressed the heaviest thing she carried, her past. The prairie remained vast and unforgiving, but together they were no longer alone. Some loves arrive loudly. Others arrive quietly and stay forever. Time did what neither of them ever could on their own. It healed quietly. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch no longer felt like a place of survival, but a place of belonging. She moved through the house with ease now, no longer careful with her steps or her words. The fear she once carried had loosened its grip. The cowboy noticed it in the small things, how she laughed without checking, who was watching, how she spoke with confidence, how she stood beside him instead of behind him. One evening, as the prairie sky burned gold and crimson, they sat on the porch in silence. Finally, she spoke. "That night, when I asked where I should undress," she said softly, "I wasn't asking about clothes. I was asking if I could finally stop hiding." He turned to her, eyes steady, voice calm. "And you did," he said. "You trusted." That changed everything. There was no dramatic proposal, no sudden music, no crowd watching, just 2 people who had chosen each other without fear. Days later, the town gathered quietly as they stood side by side, not because they needed approval, but because their story had already spoken for itself. She had come broken, unsure, guarded. He had been closed off, grieving, alone. Together they became something stronger than either had been before. The prairie remained vast and unforgiving, but it no longer felt empty. Love didn't arrive loudly, it arrived safely.